that takes more than just a safety program. It takes a safety culture. It takes some management piece. And to me, that's the exciting piece of safety.
Welcome to the Canary Report, the podcast where risk leaders, safety professionals, and operational executives come for real-world stories and smarter strategies to keep people safe. I'm your host, Michael Zhao. In each episode, I sit down with exceptional leaders who are transforming how risk and safety are managed. Whether you're a leader of a nationwide EH&S program in a high-risk industry, or you champion workplace safety across 200 retail locations, this podcast is for you. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the Canary Report. I'm Michael Zhao, the founder and CEO of Yellowbird. Today, we have David Doggette, who is a senior safety professional. He runs safety for a large family-run organization that is in Louisville, Kentucky. And in Louisville, Kentucky, you would know a very famous golf course called Valhalla. And right over here is the clubhouse of Valhalla. Very fortunate that he invited me up to visit their beautiful facility. And we are doing a live podcast. David, thank you for coming and joining me. And I would love to first let our listeners know a little bit about you as a human being. So please tell us about your journey from how you got into this career, but also your family and your hobbies and loves and likes and all that.
Sure. First, I want to thank you for joining us here in Louisville. So I was born in Southwest Louisiana, and my family came to Kentucky in 1990. So I went to high school, middle school, high school, and college here in Kentucky. So I'm not Kentucky born, but we've got that good heritage down in Louisiana of bourbon. And so I'm a big bourbon guy. And just a little bit about me. I'm an Eagle Scout, multiple combat deployment veteran of the United States Army, and close to 20 years in the safety industry. I started my safety career, honestly, I joke, learning about how to operate knives and wood implements in the Boy Scouts. That's very important in Boy Scouts. We call it the totem ship. But progressed in the Army, getting into the actual professional career, learning the Army's composite risk management systems, and really learned how to identify hazards and correct those hazards to minimize risk in the Army with over a decade. And a lot of that being an officer, some of it as a junior enlisted soldier.
Yes.
And, obviously combat teaches you a lot about hazards, and we try best to mitigate those. And then you get into training and have realistic training that preps you for that combat. But again, you still have to mitigate hazards, especially during training, because you don't want to needlessly hurt your people before the deployments. Then I got back from my first deployment in late 2007, early 2008, and started as a 1099 contractor because safety wasn't my first career choice.
Right.
And I went to college to study politics and history and thoughts of maybe going to law school. So safety was not my first choice. But while I was deployed on my first deployment, part of the process of winning in Iraq was to get rid of the enemy, so to speak, but then to build up the local populace. And during that deployment, there was a series of incidents working with the local populace of them building their own infrastructure or rebuilding, if you will. And we had an incident where a gentleman was injured during one of those projects. And that kind of piqued my interest. So I came back to the United States, and construction was one of those industries that was kind of slower during the 2008 recession to be affected. So I had an OSHA 30 at that point. So I began my safety career with Able Construction, doing a project there in Bowling Green where I lived at the time. And it was a good experience.
So David, tell me about when you first got pointed from being deployed, and you obviously were coming from a war zone, getting reintroduced to civilian life. You had that incident in the other spun oversee rebuild in Iraq and where you went to community. So tell me how you took that learning and you came back to re-engage and then become a normal, regular working man and decided to go into the safety industry. Tell us about that, Luca.
Sure. So when I got back from my deployment, obviously 2007-8 for everybody as a reference was the recession. And one of the last sectors to be affected was construction. So that was one of the jobs that I was able to find. With an OSHA 30, I kind of became a consultant, 1099 safety consultant for Able Construction. And basically took that OSHA 30 and I had a mentor. Thankfully, that's one of the things in my career is always find a mentor. Be humble to know that you don't know everything and find that mentor. And he really taught me how to assess construction hazards, identify hazards, and started learning ways in mitigating. But one of the other things of my career is as a safety professional, you don't have to know how to fix it. or just need to be able to find it and then work with others to come up with a plan for us on how to fix it. I had a really great project superintendent that, he was getting towards the end of his career, really took me under his wing, said, "Hey, I just need you to go out and be my eyes and ears, and then let's discuss." And that's what I did for about a year. And I learned how to look at construction job site there close to my house and find hazards and, really help the company finish that project and do it safely.
It's interesting you should say that because I came from a communications and satellite world for many years, and you drive around and before you're in that world, you never see an antenna. And now everywhere I drive for the rest of my life, I will see on gas stations, I will see on oil sites, I will see other remote locations, satellite. It's kind of like this industry. I don't think anybody in this industry can look at anything without a lens of safety. Right. It's just one of those things. You do train yourself over time to have a keen eye to see it's being done well, it's not being done well. Almost have an inclination to constantly stop yourself to try and help people because you do see so often they're not being done well. So I would say I'm glad you had that mentor and I love mentality because whether self-serving or not, and I acknowledge that for Yellowbird, it is self-serving and I recognize that, but not everybody can know everything. We'd be everywhere. And so that's what our model's about. But just the humility to say, I don't need to always run things missing, right? I don't have to, as long as I'm gathering the data and I'm taking it internal and we are processing properly. We still own it, but I need help figuring out what's going on in this stuff. So I love the fact that the mentor taught you that philosophy because I think it's so powerful. Not enough people take that mindset. They're always in self-preservation. So what is this going to mean from hedger? Yeah, this is what I do. If they're doing this, well, and frankly, so much to be learned. It really is. So you're at Able, the recession catches up to them. You have to find another place to go hang your out. So how long were you there? There was OA.
Yeah, so it was right at a year that I was with them. And like I said, the recession hit. Then I took a step backwards and decided I wanted to learn how to be a field hand. So I started with a stop-stove paddle and then graduated to what I call the one-stick red shovel. Learned how to operate a shovel. And I did this for a gas contractor, which ended up later serving me well. And then I got into a period of my life where the military needed me again. So I went back on active duty orders and went on my second combat deployment to Iraq again. And then I got back from that and again, stayed on some orders, helping to prepare others for deployments. And then transitioned into my civilian career at that point, which is when I picked safety back up.
What year was that?
So I picked safety back up in 2015. So started off again in the field, going out, visiting job sites, again in construction. During that time period, I had done some additional safety work for the military, some additional duty assignments is what they call them, battalion safety officer, that kind of stuff.
Right.
Kind of developing through, took a few additional safety courses through the Army, but jumped right back in the civilian world into construction. And I know that same gas contractor that I started off as a field hand came back to you as a safety guy, Dave, a safety guy. And I really developed and grew. Then I started my management piece there with them as well. Started off learning the crews, jumping in again with another seasoned field leader, just getting into the ins and outs of, hey, this is an area of weakness that we need to tackle. Here's a whole bunch of other areas of weaknesses, but I think this one's the priority. And he would say yes, or he would say no, and that kind of thing. But again, another common theme is yes, I'm a safety guy, but the field folks need to own the safety in order to, whether you're talking about on a manufacturing floor or on a job site, safety people can't be everywhere at all times. So you have to empower those folks in the field to take safety serious and own it. And I learned those lessons and learned how to influence those field leaders, get them to take the leadership in actually owning their own safety and help them be successful.
It's such an interesting and important lesson. I was talking to a gentleman, and I don't know if it was on the podcast or not. They tend to blend together over time because I do talk to a lot of people and they enjoy the conversation. The people in there this free. One of the things that it wasn't on the podcast, but it was a defense. He hadn't been on the podcast, but this was the follow-up conversation. And he was talking about how the older, guys, we've been doing it a long time and they've got all their fingers and toes and they're safe and, they don't need this stuff. He just asked them one simple question, which is, one, have you seen an incident occur, which universally the answer is dangerous, will if anything happen. So if your kid is starting again, would you be okay as well even operate below you office? And when you're a father or you are somebody who cares for others or just a human being, you ask that question, it makes you stop for a second. Like, yeah, I should see you show how to tie off it properly. We should be showing that it's just a few seconds, but lockout, tag out means,
Right.
so quickly you can go from I've done it this way forever to I jerk a ball to it.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting because that mindset of everybody has to own it, but they also have to understand why. Why they need it.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a powerful thing. But you went into leadership, you were already in leadership because you had that in the military. And so one of the things that I've found so valuable is, and you'd find that people so grateful to you, and there's a gift people are also haven't. So I will appreciate. We've also learned these skills like life and death. So we are saying that, you have these young men and women that are learning young persons and they all get in one and they don't know, neither deserve that. It is the same thing what we do. And it's certainly very just, but it's certainly not. I'm not going to put in this any level of intensity, any risk and all the things. It's way less than that. But preparation, thoughtfulness, awareness, situational awareness, but also awareness of what to do when you have a moment where you see something.
That falls right in line with, so here at LPX Group, where I came about 18 months ago, one of the things that intrigued me during my interview process with them is their core values. And our core value for safety is no accident. And you talk about being prepared for something. And I asked the question during my interview, is that mean you're chasing zeros or does that mean you're deep intention? And the resounding answer was very intentional. They have a plan and they're prepared on a regular basis every day, multiple times a day to be safe. And to your point, that takes leadership. And it doesn't mean leadership of the person with the title. It takes leadership of the person that has the capability at that moment to say, this is not right. We need to stop for a second. We need to think about what we're doing. Is it that right lockout, tag out, or do we need to double check our hazardous atmosphere before we jump into it? Those type of things. And that's where we as safety professionals need to empower those folks in the field to be able to raise their hand and ask those questions or say, hey, this doesn't look right.
You gave me a tour earlier of this facility. I am going to post some of the photos in this podcast because I want you to tell the listener and viewer about the journey of this family. But before you do, I want to highlight the fact that one, private family businesses, particularly as successful as this one goes, have to make a decision and they choose the family to understand, but often people over profit. It is expensive, and I recognize that. We make it less expensive, but there's an investment to make sure that you have the right training, that you have people that are willing to raise their hand and say, that is unsafe, I'm stopping work, because time and budget are the two things that every contractor is judged. Either day, are you on budget or are you on time? And the antithesis of that, or the opposite of that, is I'm shutting down the site because I see something that's really dangerous and it could cost us a really expensive investment. And your company has the values of people over profit. Let's tell that. So with that intro, I want you to tell the story of the family and also the different divisions and kind of where you've come to. Obviously, you're not a spokesman for the family, but you did a great job giving me a tour. So you can just give us an overview. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Before I do that, I want to kind of address that antithesis is, it's going to cost a little money to stop and do it correctly. But if you look at the cost of doing it incorrectly, typically, your safety falls right in line with your quality. Are you having to go back and redo work? Or worse, are you having to take time to sit down and retrain folks and go back and fix equipment and that kind of stuff because you are having accidents? And that a lot of safety professionals know this, but it bears worth repeating that it actually costs more time and money to do it unsafe in the end once you've had an incident than to do it correctly. So LPX Group is a brand of families. The Doherty family started after coming from Ireland in 1900 with a coal business. And in 1949, they decided they needed something for their team to do during the summer months because coal is not a full year-round business in Kentucky. And so they said, we've got these pieces of equipment, we've got these people, let's try paving. And so in 1949, we started with Louisville Paving. And in that 76 years, the company's grown. We've got now 5 brands. We've got Louisville Paving Construction. So we still do paving. We've got multiple plants that make our mixes and stuff. We've got a nationally accredited lab that helps us to check the mixes, but also to manipulate the mixes and meet the requirements, but also do it in such a way that it's more cost effective or make a better product. So that's our bluegrass testing and lab. We also have our paste division who specializes in water and wastewater facility, as well as our streetscapes and that kind of stuff. And then we also have our material transfer company, and they help us move all of our equipment as well as other folks in this community, their equipment. And then our last but not least and most recent is our bluegrass blasting division. And we brought them in-house to kind of help us be a full heavy civil, not but the heavy civil contractor of choice in the Louisville metro area.
Wonderful. Blasting. Yes, is going to be an education, although taking you back to your military background. You know how to deal with artillery. You know how to deal with armory, so forth. And so they are very fortunate to have you as their leader because you have experience with it where I can honestly tell you, if you hire somebody going back to the whole thesis of Yellow Board, and we always look at the whole person and we look truly at the whole person, not just what they've given us, but what we can gain from what they've given. So like as an example, if somebody were to us to have a supervisor on site or many supervisor on site for a week or 2 weeks or during a class, make sure everything's safe during that process. We will look for somebody who maybe have explosives or a specific military background or worked in another place that you like kind of work. But it's so interesting because a lot of folks are like, oh, well, if you have a safety professional, rich for the fun. But no, that is not the case. I would not trust 90% of my safety professionals, and God bless them. They're wonderful human beings and they all have talent. But you go into that environment, you're doing blasting. Well, another anecdotal story before we go back to you. When I was driving here, which was the most beautiful drive I think I made that taking. You've lived through your whole life and you're most of it elf. And you know, we've gone down with prices, so you may appreciate it a little more. I come from the desert. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a beautiful place, but very different. And this reminds me of North Louisiana where I used to grow a lot. But also when you're on this road 60 coming in there with Louisville, I noticed that there's a long stretch that basically goes through a mountain that was flowing to it. And it is obvious. You got cliffs on both sides of that road and you're going straight through. That hill was thick with rock and that was exploded out. And I was thinking to myself about driving up to it. When it was done particularly, it's probably a very dangerous e-bike to do. Again, everything you see, you never mind you're safe, right? Right. But must have been a very dangerous environment because I imagine, and I don't know this for a fact, but this is a very seasoned part of the country. That could have been in the 18 or 19, early 1900s. I believe that through. Yes, it was quite an endeavor.
Yeah. The road systems, it's fantastic work. First off, they're always there. They're always in need of repair, right? Yes. And Kentucky and in general, and this particular area is definitely growing. But to your point, with the road systems, a lot of times because of the hills and the mountains, right? Hills and hollers, as some folks would say, the easiest way to get through them is to get through them. Yeah, go through them. So, and of course, it comes with its own challenges. At that point, we're worried about your team's safety, but you're also worried about if you're doing it next to a road, you got to worry about the folks on the road. Do you need to shut the road down? How quickly can you get the road cleaned up if something were to go on it? Those type of things. Like you said, it comes with a lot of extra regulations that you got to follow and understand and dig into. So being a heavy civil contractor that owns plants and that kind of stuff, we also fall under INSHA and the mine safety stuff as well. So coming to LPX Group from an oil and gas distribution world, you and I were kind of talking about this prior to the podcast. 5 to 8 foot was typically deep for me.
Yes.
And I come here and I'm looking at stuff that's 20, 30 foot or blasting. And now we got mine safety and, we've got a shop. So I've got to look at the general industry stuff.
Right.
It's definitely been a challenge to really cause me as a person to be humble again, find the mentors or mentor and revisit some of the things that I've done previously in my career, those type of things, and really humble myself to dig back into those regulations and grow and develop and get better so I can help the organization grow and get better as well.
I am so appreciative of your recognition of butt space. Oh yeah, I think that is the most important piece of what we build as a industry of safety. There's an industry of construction and all the other industries, and there's even sub-industries like floor works and civil and heavy machinery and so forth. But then we as safety, depending on regulation and compliance and even insurance oversight and risk, is an industry. And there are so many people who still believe in the broad swipe of you go to an independent person or somebody you trust, and they are trustworthy and you boost them for a long time. But you a specific clip. And then you look at their website and they got 75 different things. And you look to yourself, one, they're an entrepreneur, and I commend them, and they want opportunity to make a rain for a family and take care of their community and tech. They always have good intent and they believe they can figure things out. And that is the entrepreneurial freedom. We'll figure it out. We'll get it done the right way. If I have to find some other person to help me because I'm US, spread thin or wherever else. Challenge with that is nobody is an expert. And when I hire in safety, I was a consultant to come in. And so what ended up happening, you hire one group and then another 13.10 thing, but you realize, no, he's on my side, right? Don't really low with talent, skills, your background. And so I love the fact that you're recognizing whether you do it internal, whether you use Yellowbird, whether you use somewhere else, the fact that it's not a one size fits all thing this year. It's not. It really isn't. And to your point, I started as a third-party contractor, and our model is we've got internal safety staff, but we also do site work where the general contractors, if we've got certain requirements that we meet, we've got to have a safety person on staff or on site at all times. So in order to make sure that we've got coverage and help ourselves meet those requirements, we do use third-party folks. And it does take a system of, you can look at a CV and yes, how much does the CV really tell you? Sure. But companies like yourself who vet these folks and help us identify ways of really identifying who is a person that is qualified to be on that particular job. That's where companies like yourself come in handy. And again, I'm biased. I didn't start in college learning safety. So my staff is a mixture of folks that have gone to college and folks that, like me, came to it from a different angle. And there's a lot of growth in the United States, and safety is definitely got to be part of that. One of the things that we say is collaboration is key. And part of that is collaborating with folks from outside of our company and teaming up. It's also getting those folks from outside of our organization to work with our different divisions and our folks and having them understand our company and our different brands and the different scopes of work that we do. So from a size perspective, not revenue, I know you're a private company, but from a size of people perspective, how big is the overarching company? Yeah, so currently we sit about 650. Like I said, I came in about 18 months ago. And just to show you kind of the growth period that we're in, we were just over 500 18 months ago, and we're sitting about 650 today. 25% growth. Right. Even before that, it wasn't, but maybe a decade ago that we were just over 300. So this is definitely a company that's found its legs as far as growth and developing people. And that's the other piece is, 5 generations, there's got to be a plan to hand the company over successfully. Of course. And I've got to give it to our leadership. That is one thing that they do is they develop our folks like myself, folks like my team, develop us and grow us in such a way that we can take the next step up, or we can take on additional responsibilities so we can grow the company. And it's fantastic. I was fortunate enough to meet your president. We came out here and just thank you for coming by, and very humble man. He genuinely wanted to hear what we were doing, and you can tell there are certain leaders that build a castle around themselves. So tell me about what's behind us here, because I'm sure people have been half listening to you, half looking at this beautiful year. So tell us what do we have behind us? Sure, we've got a small golf course called Valhalla. It's a private golf course, but it's beautiful. So we're actually looking towards the clubhouse. Hopefully it comes through in the video. I hope so. Yeah. But we're also looking at the south end, I think, down at the lake towards, I believe, holes 17, 19. We were fortunate to have a wonderful seat when the PGA came and played here last year. So wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what, as a golfer, I love the beauty of golf. I always say to my wife, Jennifer, that it's my opportunity to go for a walk in the park. And I get a really adventurous walk in the park because, as you discovered while playing with me, I get to see all kinds of places that nobody gets to see on a golf course. So, it's very boring to be right in the middle of the fairway every day. Very boring. Very no. If you don't learn about those woods and roughs, go into it. Exactly. Right. It is, even from this view, one of the most beautiful places I've ever seen. I've been very fortunate to see around them. So I'm hopeful to be able to get on that course at one point. I know that we're the explosive numbers and that we are part of this community here. So hopefully you and I will get to play there together at some point. Maybe we'll even do a couple of live episodes out there. So before we wrap up, thank you so much for being so generous with time.
Yep.
Tell me about your family's journey and also tell me about the complexities that you deal with the multiple companies and the multiple areas and all the road work, which means that you have road compliance, all these other things that are state specific, but also BLT and MSHA united for mining, right? First, I want to hear about the Bursma side. Tell me about your life for kids. I saw your beautiful artwork that your daughter had made you.
Yep.
So please tell us just about your personal side.
Yeah. So I actually live 2 hours south of Louisville in a town called Bowling Green. It's just north of the border between Kentucky and Tennessee. I pretty much decided after I came back from my first deployment, we were coming up, for those of you that are familiar with the road networks, up I-75 through the mountains just as the sun is rising in October. And for those that are not familiar with this part of the country, October is when the leaves start changing. So I get a beautiful sunrise with the beautiful colors of the changing seasons. I knew at that point that Kentucky was going to be home, but I went to college there in Bowling Green. So I went back to where I was comfortable, and I've pretty much lived in the Bowling Green area, not necessarily in Bowling Green, but that general area. And this company poured into me and decided to let me support me driving that 2 hours. We operate within about 150 miles, and that's right within where I live. So about a 2 hour driving distance. So the family, I've got a beautiful wife, I've got a little girl, technically my granddaughter. So I've got 2 stepdaughters, but my granddaughter lives with us. I'm helping to raise her. She goes to school there in Bowling Green. She's only got right now 3 sports, which she's asked for 4th and a 5th. We'll see what kind of time commitments we can afford. She's 8 years old, so she's been trying all the different sports of it. And Sig plays into the aspects of I'm trying to teach her do things and think about what you're doing beforehand, kind of thing. But 8 years old, it's full speed ahead. So
Exposure, man.
Yeah,
Better get exposure to everything and anything. You're right. Just to see what you don't get to pick for them. I found that out a long time. That's right. You give exposure and something is going to want to wake up and do it again.
Yeah. Well, right now it's 4 or 5 different things. My family is obviously the reason why I can work, but LPX Group is super. We like to say we're a people company that does heavy civil contracting, so big construction. And there's a lot of different ways that we demonstrate that as a company. We do events that incorporate family, that kind of stuff, and that's super important. And you kind of asked about the company and some of the different compliance aspects and stuff. That 2 hour time frame of driving, you get to see a lot of that. To your point, we do DOT work, we do work, we do different types of construction, we do OSHA, general industry type stuff. We've got that shop there. We get our hands into a lot of different things, and it's, again, very humbling for a person that comes from a different background. Got to crack open those regulations and, these days, open them up on a webpage and really dig into them and learn and stay humble. And again, find where you can, find mentors. But also at this stage of my career, it's start mentoring. You got to start developing that next generation of safety leaders. And that includes the folks in the field that, where the buckets, so to speak, are doing the work versus in the office.
It's interesting because along those lines, I've recently started thinking about just the profession and the vocation of a safety professional. And the challenge that I've always had, it's almost like calling somebody a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. And at the end of the day, there's a general practitioner. Then if you hurt your knee, you're going to go to ortho. You hurt your eye, you're going to go to an optometrist. You have digestive, you're going to be that. But there are specialties. And same thing as lawyers. We're not going to get the person to represent you having forbidden divorce as you would in a corporate litigation case.
Right.
It's a very different skill set. They're both lawyers.
Right.
And I've been trying to process why our industry wants to generalize people's background. And I think it's just kind of a philosophy around a scarcity of, I can't have 30 people on my team, but I'm responsible for all of it. And so it's kind of like the GP, right? Your general practitioner is going to identify, hey, we have a challenge with flagging and spotting out on the roadways. We need to get a better flagger training program in place so everybody knows the proper requirements, regulations, and keeps themselves safe. Because if you're out there, like as you started in your career, holding the sign to stop go, and it's a dangerous thing to do. People will fly by you at speed, and you gotta really know the proper way of doing this.
Although, I mean, the old days, even when I started, the common mentality was give the new guy the stop slow paddle. They'll either figure it out or they won't, and we'll really focus on the task at hand. Thankfully, the industry's kind of hopefully turned that corner, and we're really focusing on, to your point, let's get somebody that's super competent, well trained, properly equipped, and they will watch the backs of those guys that are in the work zone doing that work that actually makes the money, so to speak.
I won't say who this is, and it's a terrible story, but we do a lot of work with insurance, both brokers and carriers, and people who do captives about self-insure. And one of our very large brokers had an incident that was doing a major freeway, and one of the vehicles on the road went full speed into the site, and they had an egress or ingress, what if they had the entry point, but they were going 80 miles an hour when they went in, and they did not have a drop setup to have we barriers to protect people and the signage necessary. And it was a major incident, and everybody had good intent, but the reality is it was a big mission. And those are the moments that you realize training is so vitally important. Even if you're still going to be negligence on the outside, you can use ones to protect yourselves and your people. Even from what are the chances? Chances got up.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that I've always preached is emergency action plans. That comes from my military background. Obviously, we've got certain things that we were erst in the military to be able to do instinctively. But kind of talking a little bit too about we're even talking about the general practitioner. That's one of those things for me as safety professionals. We do have to be general practitioners, and there are those generalized things that we need to focus on. And emergency action procedures, I don't care if you're talking about a manufacturing setting, whether you're talking about a general industry in an office or out on a job site where we're doing confined space or in work zone, you have to have those emergency procedures of some sort. And it's better when you have them in practicing.
And you train on them. That's the thing. You can write them, but your obligation is to make sure the procedures are designed correctly and then have the people who are the best to empower others to do this execution of the piece. And I'm not going to make the answer to this question because it's a setup, but I'll tell you, industry in total, I always heartbroken because the superintendent or the general oversight manager generally will run through an extra third of class or has some level of high level, and they are knighted out as the safety supervisor. And it's such a disservice to us because what ends up happening is they are, frankly, ultimately we talked about earlier, it is more expensive. We know that doing it right the first time includes shutting down if you need to is better economic decision. But when you're bidding something out, you're not looking at that. You're looking at the time, materials, and can we perform this? And it's unfortunate because the person who's taking that ownership of that win, staying within it. Yeah, it was that same person that got knighted as safety supervisor. And they have good intent, and we know that they are. But I really feel for these people because they also we should have to make these decisions. Yeah, we shouldn't be forced into a position. And especially if they're not as fortunate to have a leadership team on guilds who would support them and say, win some, you lose some on that day, but it's better to do that on safe. There's a lot of companies that don't have that philosophy.
That's correct. But again, I see some light at the end of the tunnel, especially, you look at a lot of the contractors that are competing for contracts in the oil and gas industry. And even now in some of the world that I'm in with some of the site work, general manufacturers, it's not just can you do the work at the lowest bid, it's who's got the best safety. If you don't have certain safety metrics or your safety metrics are above certain point, you're disqualified. Or you better figure out a way to explain it to us that makes sense. And that's, again, some light at the end of the tunnel. Again, kind of talking about different aspects of safety. That takes more than just a safety program. It takes a safety culture. It takes some management piece. And to me, that's the exciting piece of safety. Some of the things that we're doing is we're incorporating technology, AI, digital technologies that we're able to see stuff in real time, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Some data analysis that's real time as well. Trying to incorporate some of that. And that's when I go to talk to new safety professionals at colleges and that type of stuff, right? I'm like, hey, This is stuff I'm just learning,
Right.
that you guys are going to be masters of by the time you're my age. No, the data analytics, you're going to be able to, we've preached leading indicators for years and years and years. Now we can take safety audits in the field that are done digitally. It's going to go to a cloud-based system. It's going to go to the data analyst system, and boom, within 5 minutes, you're going to be able to say, hey, listen, we've had 20 audits this week and 15 of those audits have said we're good, and we need to celebrate those wins. But 5 of those, we've got these leading indicators of potential issues.
And that's what it's so interesting, because I got in a debate with a safety professional around Big Brother and the camera systems, right? And things to that effect. And while I was in, my wife's family's from upstate New York. It's a great community, go there every year. It's a wonderful place to spend a few days being such, right? And my wife's cousin, his new wife, so it's a little bit of a distance. She grew up in a family where the father was a bridge inspector and for the state, and he would travel around and would do bridge inspections. And there's a big push for drones to do bridge inspections. And he says, I think it's a really good added thing. But the reality is that I take a ball peen hammer and I'll look at something that's got this tiny little speck of brown or rust. I'll take a ball peen hammer, crack it, and all of a sudden half that little area falls. That's a problem. That's not something you can do with a pro. Not yet. And I get, well, you want drones shooting at your bridges? Right. but that kind of philosophy. But here's the good part. It can identify that tiny little speck, right? It can see that kind of thing. You can see the near misses on a job site and say, we need to send out a person to go do a training where you would have never been able to catch that, be able to look for it. It's not an either or, it's an and.
It is an and. Interesting you bring that up, because we actually fly drones on a regular basis, more so for production right now. It helps us with some of our modeling and kind of tracking as we're moving dirt and that kind of stuff. It helps with our planning of the project. But there's some really cool technologies with drones coming out and other camera systems as well that some of these leading edge companies are doing, where they're taking the footage from that production, and we can also feed it into this AI. And now we're getting safety professionals out on these jobs with these flyovers, and we're getting more touches on these job sites. And that to me is, to your point, it can't be an or, it has to be an and.
Yes.
Couple that with our folks going out into the field doing those audits, and that's how we're going to get more touches, more visibility of the job sites.
So on the technology side, with the drones and being able to do, a through process of taking video, running it through AI, seeing, which is so powerful for analytics. When we're doing a ton of developer, what we're doing, not just people's resumes, but when somebody's going to go do a loss control assessment, but you have historical data on that site assessment, you've got 15 different loss control assessments from the past. And then you've got 400, 500, 600 loss control assessments from the past when you do something like the scale we do it. So we can do 500 locations, and you upload all of those, and it will give you a trend line. Sure. And it will show you areas, not from a theory perspective, but from a data perspective. Across all of these sites, you're having problems with split trip and fall, or you're having problems with lockout tank. It's been highlighted that spill management, chemical management, fire risk, whatever it is, was true at 60% of your location. And so if I were in your shoes, I would put together a program for this. There's not a lot of organizations that have the time, energy, and ability to do that. We're doing it native. And I love the fact that you as a company and was individual are using this technology, not just to make money, but actually to improve the safety culture, which is obviously we all want to make them. We couldn't feed our families, take care of the community, all the things. And we are a financially driven society. You all have to make a bit, but there is more to this technology. So we can help us improve in so many things. And no one has to be a tree hugger to feel that. You can be a capitalist and take care of people. Yeah, so this is one of the things that I love about what we do as a company. Well, I am going to say thank you very much. We'll shake your hand because I can.
There you go.
And because I don't do these in person very often. And we will put some of the pictures and we'll link to your LinkedIn. And then thank you again for doing this.
Thanks for coming.
That's it for today's episode of the Canary Report. If this conversation helped you reframe how you think about risk and safety, please do me a favor. Hit subscribe, leave a review, and share it with somebody who needs to hear it. We're building a new category of safety and risk leadership, one that's faster and smarter. Leaders who aren't just empowered by tech, but whose wisdom is accelerated by it. To learn more about how Yellowbird's cutting-edge platform is empowering leaders to solve workplace safety and risk challenges faster, smarter, and at scale, visit goyellowbird.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Yellowbird pages to stay up to date. Until next time, lead with clarity, know first, and act fast.